Idris Davies School 3-18 was created back in January 2018, and as part of that creation of a new through school, two primary schools within the cluster merged to form one 3-18 through school, and then we've got five primary schools working outside of the through school then that all work together to serve the needs of the children in the Upper Rhymney Valley. Idris Davies cluster is quite a unique cluster in that there's an all-age through school within that cluster. So we've got 1/3 of our population in year 7 comes through the all-age through school, and 2/3 then come from the external cluster. The amalgamation created a number of challenges for us as a community of schools because we needed to make sure that we were formulating a cluster vision of what we wanted to achieve across all the cluster schools and the secondary phase of the all-age through school. And it was really important that those governing bodies came together and worked on developing what we wanted to achieve as a cluster. And Curriculum for Wales was very much used as a vehicle actually to revisit our vision of what we were trying to achieve in terms of our provision across the cluster. But it's been really important from a governing body point of view then in terms of our strategic development for individual schools, that whilst respecting the uniqueness of each school and making sure that the governing bodies are obviously setting their visions for their own schools, that there was a corporate responsibility for all the pupils from across the cluster, that we're all aiming to achieve the same vision. And as I said, Curriculum for Wales has provided opportunities for us to actually reflect on our curriculum provision and what our vision for curriculum is, but we've used that as a vehicle then across the wider cluster to look at all aspects of our work. We've got a very, very tight cluster working arrangement in Idris Davies. We're very, very keen as a cluster that we don't develop an Idris Davies school way of working, that we develop an Idris Davies cluster way of working, and the formation and the foundations of that work was very much from our governing bodies actually working together and making sure that vision was there, and then the strategies underneath were brought together from a cluster and from the cluster heads working together, and then all levels of leadership sitting under that, including our staff and indeed our pupils working together to really achieve that vision that we've come up with as a cluster. Because the cluster views the work of the governing bodies in each individual school as being so important, we feel it really an area of development for us as a cluster is that we ensure that there's the appropriate range of professional learning and training opportunities in place for each of our governing bodies to be able to discharge their responsibilities to make sure that they're obviously supporting the schools as they should be. And I think one of the things that we've done recently is that we've been able to facilitate EAS and local authority training on site for all the governing bodies within the IDS cluster, and that's very much allowed all those governing bodies to come together and actually reflect on their roles and look at actually specific elements of what we're looking to drive forward in school. So for example, attendance was part of that training, pupil behaviour was part of that training, and looking at Curriculum for Wales development. So all those governing bodies were able to come together in one place and then work collaboratively and look at actually what each individual school was doing, but importantly as a cluster was looking at actually what are we doing together that we can learn from one another to drive collaboration at governing body level. But that training is really important for us in terms of moving forward to ensure that each individual governing body within the cluster has a clear understanding of what's going on in education in Wales and actually how then they can discharge their responsibilities in ensuring that each individual cluster school is working towards achieving those reform priorities. The impact of the governing bodies working closely together, I believe, is that actually when our governing bodies come together, they're actually sharing the practice that's going on in their own schools, sharing how they run their own governing body and governing bodies in each individual school. And there's that fostering of best practice and sharing of best practice across governing bodies. Now, what that's meaning is that each governing body then is reflecting the work of another governing body and making sure that they're actually refining their practices based on that sharing of best practices. And that's then permeates all aspects of the schoolwork. So if you've got a well-performing, high-performing governing body, that obviously then increases level of accountability within each school setting, which then flows down into the leaders in the school and then flows down into ultimately into the provision that each individual pupil is getting in each individual school, which obviously has the impact then of driving up standards in those schools. But I think it's really important that when it comes to the work of the governing body, that they are gathering first-hand evidence, and I think from our perspective, what working more closely together as clusters allowed us to do is actually understand how each governing body operates such procedures and actually then how we can develop our own practices with our governors in our own schools to ultimately have an impact on provision in school for our pupils.
My journey to being a governor started when my son was just 3 years old and started in Pontnottyn Primary School, and I wanted the opportunity to be part of his educational journey, and I thought by doing that and being an integral part of the school by joining the governing bodies, that provided me with that opportunity to work with the school to see how education was in the primary sector. And so that's how it started, and my passion for being a governor grew and grew over the time I spent there. I was then fortunate enough then to have a position of being a governor when Thomas transferred to his secondary education into Idris Davies. I then had a governor position in the school here, and I've been a governor now for over 17 years, and loved every second of having that opportunity of being an integral part of what we do as governors within the school, having that strategic vision, working with leadership, and all for the outcome for the communities of the learners within our school. I think one of the most important aspects of the role is about being an engaged and an active member of the governing body, being involved in school life, having opportunities to do book looks and looking and doing learning walks alongside the leadership, and working together. That collaboration, working together for success is really, really important. And that engagement is key. Being an integral part of being involved in what happens in the school is a vital part of the role of governance. We've been very fortunate as a cluster to have some excellent opportunities to have professional learning. And we've been provided with the opportunity from the local authority and the EAS to do a huge cluster project where we've been able to develop and upskill ourselves as governors on the role of governors and the importance of that, and the important part of being challenging and working alongside leadership, but also having that opportunity to look at what well-being is and how important that is, that it fits in within our governing role. Professional learning is key as governors, and to being fully engaged into everything we do, but to have that understanding and clarity of what the actual role is within the governing body. The event with the EAS and the local authority allowed us to have a consistent approach and a clear understanding of a coherent of the role of governance, and that opportunity to share that practice and work with other governors within the cluster has been absolutely key. The impact of that has been huge on our children because they've had an understanding of those pupil outcomes, of that working collaborative together to ensure success for all our learners. I think because we've got an understanding, a shared understanding and clarity of professional learning and the importance of that, being fully engaged as a governor is really, really important. Being an integral part of the school, working collaboratively with our leadership to ensure that we have, that those outcomes is really, really key. And that's been an opportunity that we've had through the professional learning opportunities that we've had as a cluster. But I think it's that consistent approach, that that understanding and that the well-being that goes on, and I have that knowledge of working collaboratively, collectively together for the impact of all.